Good morning, viewing audience, all the people in the studio, and especially our TV viewing audience at home. I am Carol Kormelink, your Toastmaster for this meeting, and it's my job to have the meeting run smoothly and to make sure that all the guests that we are having at our open house feel welcome. TV Toastmasters Club number 9523 is now called to order. The Toastmasters International is known as the leading nonprofit communication and leadership organization in the world. We have nearly 300,000 members in 12,000 clubs in 90 countries around the world. So no matter where you travel, there's probably a club that you can visit. If you'll stay tuned, you'll find out more about Toastmasters, or you can go to our website, www.toastmasters.org, and find a club near you. Toastmasters will help you find your voice and speak up in public meetings, as well as improving your communication with family, friends, and at work. Toastmasters can help you find your voice. You will speak up in public, and as well as improving your communication with your family, friends, and at work. Our TV Toastmasters Club is 5 years old. We chartered in May of 2003. We have grown, and we have a special program today. Our keynote speaker and 3 testimonials from 3 of our members. It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Gary Mull. Gary and I crossed paths 5 years ago when he was running for a district office. He was an unknown to me, and I sent him an email saying, "Who are you? I never heard of you." He sent back the most heartwarming, gracious email, and from then on, my esteem rises every time that I hear or have an encounter with Gary. He will present 5 techniques to sharpen your skills, and I will present just 5 of his credentials. If I attempted to list them all, there wouldn't be any time left for his speech. So 1, he is an international director of Toastmasters International. 2, he is a managing partner of Optability Performance Group, a communication and leadership development group that is known nationwide. 3, he is a 15-year professional speaker, and he recently gave a presentation for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. 4, he is a published author of Set Your Sails for Success and a co-author of Speaking of Success. Wind up. Upside down? Oh. Thank you. Speaking of Success, co-authored with Ken Blanchard, Jack Canfield, and Stephen Covey. 5, he is the host of a quarterly Toastmasters interview show on TV. He is a very good listener, and he knows how to encourage his guests to put their best foot forward. He is well qualified to speak to us today. There are no guarantees. However, I guarantee that you will learn at least 1 tip today that will help you sharpen your skills. When you hear his presentation, be an exceptional presenter in person and on television. 5 key techniques to sharpen your skills. Let us give a hearty welcome to our keynote speaker, distinguished Toastmaster Gary Mull. Be an exceptional presenter in person and on television. 5 key techniques to sharpen your skills. Gary Mull.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carol, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate those warm words. I do have something to add, however, to those credentials. This has been an exciting week for me, so I wanted to announce it to this group first. I have just signed a 1-year contract with HBO. I'm very excited about that. And it's a great contract, too. I get all those movies, sports, and entertainment, and it only costs me $20 a month. So I'm very excited. But that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about you. And for those of you listening at home, I want you to also get your fingers from the remote, because you're going to learn some of the things that you need to know to be an exceptional presenter. Many of us had speech classes in school. Many of us have maybe learned some things from books and so on, and that perhaps has made you an acceptable presenter. But what I'm going to tell you today will take you from that level to the next level and help you be an exceptional presenter. There's a couple of key points that I'm going to cover today, and I want you to remember them. So I have some little gestures I'd like you to do with me. And for those of you at home, you can do them with me as well. But the key elements of being an exceptional presenter are, number one, we must structure our message. We have to get attention, and we have to connect with the audience. Okay? Structure our message, get attention, and connect with the audience. And so today I'm going to talk about 5 key points that will help you to achieve those goals. And we're going to start off by answering some of the common questions that you may have about giving an excellent presentation. For example, I get the question all the time, how do I go about preparing for my presentation? What's the process that's used to prepare an exceptional presentation? And so we'll talk about that today. We'll also talk about probably one of the chief concerns that I get. According to the Book of Lists, public speaking is the #1 fear among Americans. It ranks even above the fear of death, believe it or not. So for most of us, as the joke goes, at a funeral we would rather be in the box than giving the eulogy. I don't know if that's true, but according to the Book of Lists, statistically that's correct. So I'm going to dispel that. I'm going to give you some key techniques to overcome that nervousness that all of us tend to feel when we get in front of a group, especially when we're unaccustomed to it. So I may not get the butterflies to leave you completely, but at least we'll help to get them to fly in formation. So you can use that little bit of nervous energy to work for you instead of against you. We're also going to talk about some of the dynamic things you can add to your presentation to keep that attention and to get that spark that makes the difference in connecting or not connecting with an audience. And we're also going to talk about some of the connection tools that will be essential to making sure that the audience gets your meaning. So let's get started. First of all, we talked about structuring the presentation. What are some things that we need to do when we put together our presentation to begin with? Well, number one, we don't just throw a whole bunch of things together and say, well, this is going to be my presentation. So many people start with that. They start doing research. They start getting clips from the internet. They start pulling all these things together from the library and so on, and that's what they want to build their presentation from. Well, that's not really a good way to start. And if you think about it, think about building a house. Does the contractor take a truckload of lumber and back it up into the lot and dump it there, and then expect the carpenters to start putting things together and building some kind of a reasonable semblance of a house you'd want to live in? Probably not. We've got to have a plan. We've got to have a structure. And the first thing that we start with in any presentation is our goal. What is the purpose of our presentation? Because if we don't know that, we're pretty much wasting our time with the presentation, aren't we? It's very difficult to go a direction that we want to go. How many of you are golfing fans? All right. Anybody watch Tiger Woods out there? Any Tiger Woods fans? Yeah, he's an excellent golfer. But I'm here to tell you today I can actually golf better than Tiger Woods. I can shoot farther, and I can come closer to the pin than Tiger Woods. Now there's a caveat. If we put a blindfold on Tiger Woods and spun him around a few times, I could outshoot him. And you're thinking, well, that's silly, of course. How in the world could he ever hit a goal that he couldn't see? Well, so I ask you, when you're giving a presentation, how do you expect to give an exceptional presentation if you don't know what the goal is? So start with the end in mind. What is it I want to achieve with this? Am I in sales and I want to sell something? Do I want to get elected to office? Do I want to get people to think differently, to do things differently? What do you want them to know at the end of the presentation? And that's where you start. And then you start doing the research and start figuring out what is it I want to add to this presentation to bolster my point. What is it that I want to add entertainment value? For those of you that enjoy sports, there's 2 guys in the booth. When you watch a basketball game, when you watch a football game and so on, there's one guy giving the play-by-play. Okay? Jones is down on the 30-yard line. That'll be a first down for the Bengals. And there's another guy that says, yes, Jones, he's got a couple of kids and a wife at home, and he's originally from Colorado, and he gives you the color commentary. So add the play-by-play. That's going to achieve the goal of your speech. And then add the color commentary. That's what makes it interesting, and we'll keep that attention. Because again, we structure our speech, we get attention, and we connect with the audience. And when we prepare, we want to make sure we have all of those elements in mind. So that's preparation. What are some things that I can do to make my presentation more dynamic? What are some stumbling blocks, perhaps, that we have in making our presentation dynamic? And we've all seen them. Presentation where it turns into the hour of total agreement. Everyone's going, yeah. Nobody wants to give a presentation like that, but we've all seen them, right? Any victims? Okay. Well, we don't want to victimize our audience by putting them to sleep or by giving them information they don't need or by rambling on and things of that nature. We want to make sure that what we offer them is of value. And so let's talk about some of the techniques that we can use. And the first one I want to talk about is, again, organization. I talked about structuring the speech. Now, why is organization important for putting together the speech and then again in delivering the speech? Well, let me ask you this. If you're standing on a street corner and the bus comes along and it has no sign on the front telling you where that bus is going, how many of you are going to jump on that bus? No, that'd be silly. You'd ask the bus driver, well, where's this bus going? Or, hey, don't you have a sign up there? Where are we heading today? We don't want to just jump on a bus we don't know where it's going, and our audience is not going to get on the bus with us unless they know where we're going. So at the beginning of the presentation, just like I did today, we want to say, here's where we're going, and here's why we're going there. Let me take you on a journey. And if you connect with the audience appropriately, you'll take them on that journey throughout the content of your speech, and that's what it's all about. So organization is very, very important. Also, it's important to make sure that we get appropriate eye contact with our audience. When we're dealing on television, it's also important we connect with our audience at home. So occasionally we need to glance up at the camera and acknowledge the people who are watching at home. Here in the studio audience, people are looking back at me, and some are smiling and nodding. Fortunately, no one's dozing off, so that's good. At home, there are also people there that are engaged in what you're saying, hopefully, and you have to acknowledge them as well. So look at the camera just as you would an individual in the audience. Pause for just a couple of seconds to make sure that we're acknowledging the people there. How many of you took a speech class in school? Okay. Did your speech instructor tell you about eye contact? Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. What was the key point that they had on eye contact for giving a presentation in most colleges? What is eye contact in a speech class? Where do they tell you to look? Now look at the back of the room, right? Get a lot of that. Is this eye contact? No. Can you imagine coming up to someone on the street and saying, hello, how are you today? They would think you were crazy. And if you think about it, it's crazy to give a speech like that too. Because ultimately, what is a presentation? It's a conversation with the audience. It's a connection. It's communication between two parties. You may be speaking to 1,000 people, but you're still connecting between you and that individual audience member, and with the camera, with the people at home as well. So make sure that you pause for just a moment on the individual's eye. Make sure you get a little bit of acknowledgement, or at least try to see a little spark there, that they're not thinking about mowing the lawn and things later on. And if you need to, you need to maybe get that attention back a little bit. So that's another reason you watch the audience, is to gauge their reaction. If you start seeing puzzled expressions, okay, where's he going with this? What's going on? You maybe need to slow down a little bit, or maybe you need to repeat some things, or maybe you need to question the audience. A lot of you maybe didn't understand that. Let me repeat that. So it's important that we gauge the audience's reaction to the things that we're saying. It's a little difficult with the camera, so it's helpful with a live studio audience. But you need to make sure that you're making that connection. That's what eye contact is all about. Another eye contact faux pas that a lot of speakers make is they do this. Okay? It's the roving eye contact. Is this eye contact? No. You're basically, you look like you're at a mad ping pong match or something. It's distracting, number one. And number two, it really doesn't connect with anybody. If you pause for just a few moments and talk to people, you'll be a much more effective speaker, and you'll be giving an exceptional presentation instead of an acceptable one. So pause just for a few moments. With a camera, you also need to remember to include the camera as a third person in the group. Now, what you shouldn't do with eye contact and cameras is worry about which camera's on. Remember the old Saturday Night Live presentation where the speaker's talking to this camera and the camera over here is on, and he turns over here and the camera over here is on. And it's hilarious, except when you're trying to give a serious presentation. So you don't want that to happen to you. So don't do the scanning, which camera's on here, because it's distracting to the people at home and also to the audience. And you don't want to do that in a group either. If you're doing this and scanning around, people are confused. What's he doing up there? Is he watching a tennis match, or is he trying to communicate with me? And the answer is obvious. We're not communicating. So eye contact. Something else I think is very interesting. If I look out into a group, and especially the larger the group, the more this is true. If I look out into a group and I look at a particular person, I ask the group, raise your hand if you think I'm looking at you right now. And periodically, the person I'm looking at won't raise their hand. They're afraid to. But what will happen is all the people around that person will raise their hand. Because if you connect with a single person in the audience, all the people around them also feel connected with. So it's a kind of multiplier effect. If you start connecting with the audience on an individual level, the whole thing will spread among all the audience members. They'll feel communicated with. Let's talk about distractors. What kind of things can be distracting to an audience, either a live audience or a television audience? Well, when we think of distractors, what do we think of automatically? We start thinking of external factors, people with their cell phones that are ringing, and things like the air conditioning system or other distractors. But actually the main source of distraction for most audiences is what you see in the mirror when you shave in the morning or put on your lipstick. It's you. And so if we can eliminate the distractors that we ourselves as speakers cause, we'll eliminate probably 80% of the distractors that are out there. And what do I mean by distractors? You ever notice this during a presentation? Okay, rocking back and forth. And it can be various variations of rocking. It can just be up on the balls of the feet. It can actually be the full rock, back and forth. Okay? It can be the side to side. You're getting sleepy, sleepy, tick-tock. So it could be a variety of those combinations of things. Some people do both. You know, occasionally they'll do this, then they'll go to the rocking. So at least they throw in some variety, make it entertaining. What else? How about our wardrobe? Can our wardrobe be distracting? Okay, especially on television. If I were to have worn a yellow suit today, I might look like a floating head up here. Okay? If I'm wearing stripes or I'm wearing a really interesting check pattern, it can cause distortion in the television viewer's mind or in their eye. And for an audience, you also don't want to distract them by wearing anything that's going to take their attention from the message and put it on the things that you're wearing. If you wear dangly earrings, I never wear my dangly earrings anymore because they tend to distract. People are looking at the earrings, and I've seen speakers do this. They're necklace. And also, if you have things on, like a necklace or you have a pen in your pocket or something, you're going to play with that. At least you'll have a propensity to play with it, and that in itself can be distracting. Now, you notice I don't have any pens in my pocket, but I brought one with me here to show you. If you're going to carry a pen with you, this is the kind of pen you want. And notice the absence of the little clicky thing on top. As you know what happens if you get up there and you have it in your hand. So unless you're giving a 60 Minutes interview, you don't want that to happen, because it's distracting to the audience. And I would say if you need a pen, lay the pen on the table or lay it on the lectern so that it's not a distraction. This tends to act like a magnet. So if you have it in one hand, it's going to attract the other hand. And you don't want to do that for two reasons. Number one, you want to have your hands free to give appropriate gestures. And number two, because it makes the audience dizzy wondering what you're going to do with that pen next. Okay? So leave the pen on the lectern or on the desk if indeed you're going to use a pen at all. If you don't need it, leave it in your seat. Leave it in your briefcase or tuck it in your hip pocket or your purse. So what other distractors are there? How about ahs and ums? Any C-SPAN fans? Okay? We watch our nation's leaders on TV. And these are our nation's leaders. Can it be distracting? Absolutely. Now, I'm not talking about an occasional ah and and That happens to all of us. But if you make it excessive, people start counting them. And then they'll give you a count at the end of your speech. Oh, you had 532 ahs and ums. You have about this much content and about this much in superfluous verbal hesitatory conjunctions and attempted assassinations on the King's English. And it's a distractor. So don't let it happen to you. What else is there in the way of distraction? What other distractions can we have as a speaker? How about movement? The camera people are going to hate me right now. And the audience is probably going to hate me right now. Okay? Moving back and forth. I call that the caged lion. And if you're doing a caged lion, and it's especially distracting on TV because the camera's got to try to follow you. But you'd be amazed how many speakers just pace back and forth. Is it okay to move? I highly recommend it. But it should be purposeful movement. If I was going to make a point, I might come out here and make my point out here, especially a very powerful point. Or if I'm in an especially large group, then I can move from side to side to make sure both sides of my audience feel connected with. But other than that, it's just distracting if we're pacing back and forth. It's just like rocking back and forth or up and down. It's very distracting. How about this? Okay, the jingling of the keys. Now there's two forms of this. You can do the external or the internal. Okay. And believe it or not, the camera and the microphone can pick that up. So if you're standing there doing this, now, some of you at home maybe can hear that, some of you can't, but the people here can, and it's probably very distracting if you keep doing it. So pens and keys and other things that jingle or jangle or make noise, do away with them before you get up to speak. That's a good rule of thumb. How about your posture? Can your posture be distracting? Sure. Now, we tend to do this, and when we have a microphone especially, I see tall people come to the lectern and they do this because they want to talk right into the microphone. Now, does this present a good, solid executive presence at the lectern? No, you look like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, okay? The bells, the bells. Somebody wants to listen to you like that. Stand up. If you need to adjust the microphone, adjust it. Or leave it where it is. The microphone can probably pick up your voice. Maybe you need to raise the volume a little bit, but don't do one of these numbers. Also, when you're on camera, some people have a tendency to do this. Now, I'm taking a big risk doing this with the cameras on because it probably accentuates my double chin. And makes me look like I'm long in the neck, and it really distorts your appearance on TV. So you should put your chin down slightly and deliver your presentation this way. That way you look like you're interested, you're engaged, especially with the people at home, and it looks like you're delivering points directly to them, which you are, or you should be. So just tilt the chin down slightly and deliver things that way. What else are there? What else are the distractors that drive people crazy? Okay, ladies, sometimes, and sometimes it's just this. Okay, flipping the hair back. You know, barrettes were invented what, in the '60s? Use them. Okay, hair bands. You need to tie things back. Men, and a little bit of consort. Squirt it on the hair, keep it from flipping around. But most of the time it's not because your hair is out of order, it's just a nervous habit that we have. And how do we eliminate these distractors? Well, a good thing to do is videotape yourself. Some of your gestures can be distracting too. Some people make their points like this. Their hands constantly flip around. So if you put it on a video and you watch it and fast forward, you know, you're like this. So people will say, oh, I don't want to do that. And exactly, because your audience sits and watches that the whole time, and pretty soon it becomes what? A distractor. So eliminate that. Well, that begs the next question. What do we do about gestures? What kind of gestures should we put into our presentation? And there's a key word that you can all write down, and that is natural. If your gestures are natural, they'll be accepted to the audience. They'll help you connect. Anything that stands between you and the audience is going to be a distraction from your message. So the gestures you use should be natural. They shouldn't be dragged in by the heels to be shoved into your presentation unnaturally. I caught a fish and it was this big. Okay? No, it's clearly unnatural. It'll distract from what you're trying to do, unless you're trying to get comedic effect. But make sure your gestures are natural. And sometimes you need to rehearse them a little bit to find out where you want to put them in the presentation, but they shouldn't look rehearsed. So if you're talking about maybe statistics and you say, our sales are down this month, but we're hoping next month they'll go up a little bit, and then they'll go up a little bit the month after that. And pretty soon we'll have reached our goal for the year. Okay, natural gesture. You notice also when I'm giving gestures, I'm using an open hand. Gestures with an open hand are non-threatening, they're inclusive. For example, if I were to talk about all of you, okay, all of you can benefit from the information that I'm about to give. Using the open, notice I didn't say all of you can benefit from the information that I'm about to give. This is a threatening gesture, so don't do that. You notice Bill Clinton does this, okay, with the bent finger. That's okay. Everybody has their, or the thumb. That's okay. He's a good communicator. Now, if you watch some of his earlier tapes, you might see he's doing a little bit of this. And he was able to eliminate some of that because this is threatening. However, if you watch some of his presentations during the whole Monica Lewinsky issue, he went back to doing some of this. Because under stress, we tend to revert to some of our natural leanings. So be aware of it. And the only way to get over that is to practice it right. Get the practice in there and videotape yourself so you can see the things you're doing and work with a coach to give you the feedback you need to eliminate some of those distractors. What other kind of gestures are useful? Well, obviously we want them to be natural. Unaffected, is that a good word? Unaffected gestures. For those of you who like to watch Cabot Robert, if you've seen old movies of Cabot Robert, you know, kneeling down on the stage and doing these kinds of things. Unless you're on a big stage where there are a lot of people out there that maybe will not be able to see your gestures clearly from the back, I would do away with some of these very large gestures. It's okay to do them once in a while, but they tend to look unnatural. You wouldn't go to a person on the street and have a conversation and say, "Hi, how are you? So good to see you. I caught a fish. It was this big, and we went out to the lake." It just seems unnatural. And keep in mind our key points. Structure the talk, get attention, and connect with the audience. And weird and wild gestures break that connection with the audience. Don't let that happen to you. Now, it may get attention, so if you're doing that for attention, and it's a brief bit of attention you're trying to get, okay. For comedic effect, okay. But when it comes down to the actual presentation, you've got to make that connection. That's what it's all about. How about vocal variety? What is vocal variety? No offense to Ben Stein. If you watch the Clear Eyes commercial, if you have dry eyes, you need to use Clear Eyes. If you use clear eyes, you won't have dry eyes. You got to buy my product. Well, that's his shtick. That's fine. And he does that because it's for comedic effect. But if you talk like that and you're in a monotone the whole time, it's going to put people to sleep. I listen to Deepak Chopra occasionally, but I can't listen to him in my car. He just has this soothing voice. I think of the body as a swarm of bees. And it's just a soothing, and I want to drive off the highway. And I love his information. Just awesome information there, and I love his tapes. But he's got that very repetitive tone. It's very soothing, and if you have a soothing tone, be aware of it. Make sure you add some things in there that are going to jolt your audience awake every once in a while, or they're going to miss out on the information. And by the way, I don't think that you can maintain an audience's attention for any great span of time. I think you constantly have to regain their attention because people tend to drift off. You can't speak fast enough for most people's ears to listen. So you have to constantly do things to regain their attention and draw them back into the information that you're presenting. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. So, again, get that attention. How do you do it with vocal variety? There's an example right there. Give a pause, especially before or after important information. Give just a few moments for that bit of information to sink in or to prepare the audience for important information. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you we are out of beverages. There will be no more drinking. We're out of Coke. We're out of Pepsi. I'm terribly sorry. Okay, important information. Make sure you put that appropriate level of pausing in there. Now, did I give that more gravity than it probably deserved? Absolutely. That did it for comedic effect. But you can see how it works. What about humor? We use humor in our speeches. In fact, the conventional wisdom is we always open with a joke, right? Come out, funny thing happened on the way to the studio. No, don't try to do that. Now, if you're a comedian, okay, great. That's if you can make it funny and you can entertain people and use that to get attention, super. But if you try to open up with a joke and the joke bombs, guess what happens to your presentation? Yeah. It goes right down too. So don't try to open with a joke. Now I opened with a little bit of humor, talking about my contract with HBO and so on, but it was very quick and it led right into my presentation. So this is a good way to open your presentation. If you can say something that could be perceived as humorous, especially if you're using it to connect with the audience, something that is, of course, mutually of annoyance to the audience and you, it can serve as a point of humor. Let me give you an example. I was in a hotel that was a little bit pricey. It was a Marriott Marquis, and we had a speaker that came up, and everyone was talking about how pricey the hotel was, how expensive the meals were, how expensive the rooms were. So he came up to the lectern and he said, "Welcome to the Marriott Marquis." Marquis is a French word meaning overpriced hotel. So it connected instantly with the audience. It was a little bit of humor. And also, if it didn't get a big laugh, he could just keep going as if he was serious, because it was an overpriced hotel. So if you can add some things in there that might be humorous but can still make a point to what you're going to say, that's the best kind of humor to use. Don't use something completely unrelated to your talk. Otherwise, if it falls flat, everyone knows you try to tell a joke and it fell flat. It doesn't endear the audience to you, and it breaks that connection. Also, there's this thing that it was invented years ago by Al Gore called the Internet. Okay? And the Internet has every joke ever known to mankind floating around. So probably any joke you're going to tell, most people have heard it before. If you use a little bit of humor or something that ties in, that's great. If you're trying to tell this joke that you heard on the Internet, it's probably been around the world a few times before you got it, and it's going to fall flat for that particular reason. Okay? So use humor if you're good at it. Make sure it ties in. Don't drag it in by the heels. Another thing that you can use to make that connection with the audience are personal stories, or stories that illustrate your point. So rather than saying, here's the way it is and here are the facts, say, look, I know this couple, and politicians use this quite frequently. You know, I had this couple that I talked to from Illinois, and they had such and such a problem, and the husband lost his job, and the woman couldn't get health care, and then they go back into the point. And here's the point of this particular presentation. You can use that same device by using stories, either personal stories or people you know or stories you've heard, to illustrate the point you're trying to make. And it makes that connection with the audience that you will not get if you just try to present cold, hard facts. Okay? I've used several stories today. Talked about the guy that talked about the hotel. I used several stories, personal stories of audiences I've dealt with and so on. Try to do those sorts of things to make that connection with the audience. Another good thing to use is quotations. You can use quotations and you can do them well. Insert them in your speech. Sometimes what other people said is a lot more poignant than anything you can come up with. Okay? For example, John Kennedy's, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Now, if you're going to use a quote, make sure you get the quote right. I've seen it done by people who should know better. They stand up and they say things like, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what your country can do for other people. Okay? Now, everyone knows the quote, and you're going to look like a buffoon. Unless you're using it for comedic effect, probably not a good thing. If you're going to use quotes and you have a propensity to maybe not remember the quote, you might want to write it down. And you can read from the quote. Nobody cares. You can break eye contact for that few minutes and read the quote. John Kennedy once said, ask not what your country can do for you, and so on. And make sure you give attribution for the quote as well. If you're not sure of the quote, you can also use a paraphrase. So a paraphrase is just something, okay, he meant this, and you can describe the quote rather than giving the actual quote. Especially if you can't remember it, don't try to fake it. Because I guarantee someone in the audience, especially on television, will know where that quote came from. And it doesn't work well for you. I want to talk about nervousness. How many of you are nervous when you get up in front of a group, especially in front of a camera? A little bit? Okay. Some people are terrified. After 20 years in Toastmasters, I'm always asked, what was the best speech you've ever heard? And I can't answer that, because I've heard a lot of good speeches. But I know the most memorable speech I ever heard was a young lady that came up, clutched the lectern, and began to shake on her first speech. And then she began to cry, and she said, I can't do this, and sat back down. And of course, being the mutually supportive, positive learning environment we are, what happened next? That's right. She got a round of applause, because that was probably one of the toughest things she'd ever done. And it's very scary for people to come up and speak before a group when they're not used to it. So that's a great thing about Toastmasters, is we provide the incentive. And by the way, I'm proud to say that lady is now a trainer on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So she was able to overcome that because she had that support from the group and the ability to practice in that positive environment. And so that's exciting. But if you're nervous, what are some things that you can do to help overcome that, in addition to practicing before a wonderful group like Toastmasters? Well, number one, relaxation techniques will help you. If you use relaxation techniques, some deep breathing, close your eyes, deep breath before you go on. It can be very soothing and relax you a little bit before you get in front of a group. But I think even more powerful than that are visualization techniques. If you can visualize yourself being successful, then chances are you will be successful. A recent study by Harvard University took a basketball team and divided it in half. Half of the team was asked to stand at the free throw line and throw free throws with a basketball. The other half of the team was asked to go to the free throw line and visualize throwing free throws without a basketball. Now, when they did a test at the end, of course, the team, or the half of the team that had the basketball did better than the team that didn't have the basketball, but it was only by about 7%. Why is this? Because the body has difficulty distinguishing between what's real and what is envisioned. So if you visualize yourself being successful, when you get up here, you've done it before, according to everything your body knows. You've done a successful presentation. When we've done things before and we've done them well, it becomes easier. If you can, get into the venue. If you're going to be in a studio, get into the studio. Become familiar with the cameras. If you're going to be in a big auditorium, get into the auditorium physically before you go to speak for real. And get used to visualizing the audience. Not in their underwear, okay? Which is the common thing that people tell us to overcome nervousness. If that works for you, that's fine. But if I'm sitting in the front row, I know when someone's visualizing me in my underwear. I don't like that. But get in there and visualize yourself being successful. That's what it's all about. Also, make sure you are prepared. It's nice to be able to deliver a speech without notes. If you have a teleprompter, that's fantastic. If not, bring your notes with you. Because if you try to memorize your speech word for word, sure enough, just like a train that gets off the track, it's not going to take an off-road path and jump back on the track. If it gets off the track, you're going to be up here stammering and stuttering, and nobody wants to see that. It makes the audience uncomfortable. But along that point, if you do happen to stammer, if you do happen to stutter, if you're thinking about things and it takes you off the track, don't worry about it. In fact, there's a case where, what was I going to say? I forgot. Okay, I'm fooling you. But how did you feel just now? Did anyone say, oh, gee, get this bum off the stage? Good. Oh. No, you were thinking, okay, come on, think of the next word. You were pulling for me internally, and your audience is pulling for you. They want you to be successful. They're not out there to throw things at you. They're not out there to tear you apart or hang you in the lobby. They want you to be successful. And so if you come up there with that expectation to know that your audience is on your side, you'll be a lot less nervous. And if you think about it, what is it we get nervous about when we get up here to speak? Yeah, we get up failing. What else? Maybe tripping, falling down. Is my fly open? That's a nice thing about having a table up here, right? Nobody cares. But if you think about all the things we tend to get nervous about, they're all us-focused. They're all us-focused. What is it the audience is going to think of me? And we need to turn that around, because making a connection with the audience involves connecting and giving them the information. So it's all about them, it's not about you. And that will alleviate 99% of your nervousness and help you get over the stage fright that some people have. And of course, the other alternative is to practice. It's just like swimming. If you like to swim, most of us didn't go to the library and check out a really good book on swimming. Those people have drowned, they're not here. You got to jump in the water. And if you want to be a better speaker, you need to speak. You want to be a better swimmer, you got to swim. So get into a location where you can get some good feedback, where you can practice the art of speaking in a positive, supportive environment, and that's where Toastmasters is really a wonderful organization. They'll give you feedback, you'll have a written evaluation, an oral evaluation, and you'll get the positive support that you need to become an exceptional presenter. So what did we talk about today? We talked about overcoming nervousness, we talked about preparation, we talked about advanced techniques, we talked about enhancements. And we talked about, especially something that concerns us all, how do we prepare our presentation? So 5 good points, keeping in mind the goal of our presentation, and that is to structure the message, get attention, and connect with the audience. And that's what it's all about. It's been a pleasure to be here. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something, and now I'll take questions. Any questions from the group? Yes, sir.
Why did you personally join Toastmasters?
That's a great question. Why did I join Toastmasters? Well, actually, I had a great impression of Toastmasters. I had an uncle who was a Toastmaster, and I was always impressed with his speaking abilities. He was the kind of guy that could go into a donut shop and get him to give you a baker's dozen, 13 donuts instead of 12, just from talking to the guy. He was a guy that if somebody didn't hold the door open, he would rush over, hold the door open for you, and he was very confident. He had a lot of self-confidence, and I always admired that. So when I saw a sign that Toastmasters were meeting, I said, I got to go check this group out. They obviously are doing something well. And what I found was a group of people that said, you've got some skills. Because I did. I was involved in theater and school and things like that. And I had some skills. But they said, you can be better than what you are, and we can help you get there. And so I stayed 20 years now, 20 years last month. So that's what initially attracted me. I think I saw a hand over here. Yes, sir.
Where can I get some more information about Toastmasters?
That's a great question. Where can I get more information about Toastmasters? We have a wonderful website. It's www.toastmasters.org. And in there you'll find a little button that says Find a Club. And if you click on that, you can type your zip code in, and it'll help you to find a club near you. We have a network of over 12,000 clubs worldwide in about 92 countries. So I can guarantee you, wherever you are, you can find a Toastmasters club that's within some proximity, and they're always welcoming. They'll be glad to have you in as a guest. You can just relax and see what's going on. Nobody holds you at gunpoint to get up and give a presentation. So that's your second meeting. First meeting, no. But they're always a welcoming group and a warm group, and Toastmasters in general are a wonderful group of people because they're interested in their own self-development, and they're also interested in yours. So go to www.toastmasters.org and find all the information. Other questions? I think I saw a hand back here. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about how many words per minute? If a person is writing a script, what's a good goal?
A good goal is, I've heard it a lot of different ways. I tend to speak at a more rapid pace. Some people speak at a slower pace, and it depends on the goal of the presentation, to kind of go back to my first point. If your goal is that you want to weave a story, you want to maybe do a little more emotional connection, you ought to slow that down a little bit. So there are speakers who do that very, very well. If you're delivering a lot of information in a short period of time, you can pick it up to a more rapid pace. And that you have to keep in mind too that it's generational as well. So a lot of people listening at home right now have their thumbs on the remote, okay? They're thinking, all right, I need a break because I got to flip through the channels. And if you watch some of the shows today, it's boom, 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 this is happening, that's happening. The ear can listen at twice the rate that the mouth can speak. So you don't want people to mentally, even in a live group, have their mental thumbs on their remotes, and they're going to be thinking about something else. You want to make sure that you can keep their attention and regain their attention on a regular basis. So I tend to go for a more rapid pace than I do for a slower pace, unless we're doing it for effect. Okay? Any other questions? All right, well, it's been my pleasure to be here. Hopefully you've learned something. You've picked up at least one tip that you can use to take and apply, because really it's all about action. If you learn this information and you put it in your notes and you tuck it away somewhere, it's no good. So take action with the information that we presented. Use the information. Go to a Toastmasters club and try it out. Get into that manual and give some speeches and find out how well you can do. And you can be not just an acceptable presenter, but you can be an exceptional presenter.
Thank you. Stay here. Sheila. I would like to ask Sheila Mudd-Baker to come up.
Gary, on behalf of TV Toastmasters, yet another gift. Gary gets gifts from groups all the time because he is such a wonderful speaker. We hope you can use this.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you. I
appreciate it.
really enjoyed it. I know everybody else did too.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. You mentioned one thing about quotations, and I found out when I was starting my business, being a new person, one small little person, if I took a great person like John Kennedy that could apply to my program, that made my program sound a lot more important. So that is real important about that. And I also found another thing, the person who comes up and trips and goes to the club, to the lectern, and they're tripping, people in the audience who were so afraid to come up because they would never be as good and as poised as Gary, they're going, well, I can do that. And then they will try to speak, whereas they were afraid to before. We are now going to have three Toastmasters from TV Toastmasters give their testimonials on the value of Toastmasters to them. And we will begin with our club president, Gordon Kelly, the top-ranking officer in the club. He lives in Maysville, Kentucky, travels over 1 hour to get here, even when it's snowing, and drives one leg. So let us hear from Gordon Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Good morning, Cincinnati. I'd like to say good morning and welcome to our television audience, all of our guests here today. This is the largest group, by the way, that I've ever spoken in front of, and our members. And this is a really large group for us. Gary, my greatest fear really, now I've really got a second greatest fear now. It used to be speaking in front of public, period. Now it's speaking after someone that speaks that really knows what they're doing. I mean, I'm basically shaking, Gary, so you did it. Toastmasters International has given me the opportunity to experience the emotions that are part of public speaking. The nervousness, which I am definitely experiencing, the panic from forgetting something that you had wanted to say in your speech and left out, that is a big one for me. Laughter from the group, whether it's something you said or didn't say. I don't think I've ever seen a Toastmasters group laugh at you as a person. I don't think that's ever happened, and that's one of the great things about Toastmasters. And one thing that's really great about Toastmasters is feeling the success after you've completed a speech. My first speech was like that, and after I completed it and headed home, again, an hour drive back to Maysville, and I thought, man, that really feels good to do that. It's also allowed me to focus on improving my speaking rather than obsessing over things that I did wrong, and I'm the worst at that. If I do a mistake or make a mistake, it seems like I have this obsessive thing about going over it and over it and over it, and it kind of drives me crazy. So I've learned to try to control that and not think about the mistake so much as the future and preparing for the future and trying to improve on my speeches. It has helped me to realize that being perfect is really not the most important thing. But the most important thing I feel now is that I try to prepare as best I can for my speech and to do a good job on my speech. When I first joined Toastmasters, I called Carol Kormelink on the phone. I saw it on the internet. Actually, my sister had mentioned it to me a couple of years prior to that. And I thought, what in the world does Toastmasters even mean? I'd never heard the word. I called Carol, showed up to a meeting, and the second meeting I joined. So if there's guests here today that want to join the first meeting, you can do it. We don't object to it. I'm now in my third year, and I have given 10 speeches to date. And while Toastmasters promotes communication and leadership, I find it to include a whole lot more than that. It's helped me to learn how to participate in discussions rather than sit on the outside or get into discussion and get carried away with emotions. I think I'm more able to actually discuss things on just a normal level without getting too high or too low in the discussion. It's helped me to control my own nervousness, to slow up and not go so fast. I know Gary said he was talking pretty fast. I feel I talk fairly slow. But it's also given me a greater sense of person, of esteem, and self-respect for others. Overall, I know that Toastmasters has helped me to communicate better at my job and in my personal life. And for this, I would like to thank all the members of this club, the club, and Toastmasters International. Thank you.
I have one question for you, Gordon. When you first came to Toastmasters, and I said, I think you would be a good president, had you considered that before?
No.
And that's my job to find leaders.
And
so
you did it.
Thank you. And you've been very good. Let's give him another hand. We have 8 officers in our TV Toastmasters Club. All Toastmasters have 7. We have an additional one of a production advisor, which is Nikki Bishop, who is back there running the controls. We will now hear from our second ranking officer, Darren Henderson. He does not have quite as far a drive from Kentucky, but in Cold Springs, but he does. And let us welcome Vice President of Education, Darren Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, especially our guests. I apologize for my voice. I've been under the weather this week, unfortunately. But I'd like to congratulate our guests because you've already accomplished the biggest hurdle most people have towards joining Toastmasters. You've come to your first meeting. My name is Darren Henderson, as Carol mentioned. I've been a member of Toastmasters for 10 years on and off, and I'll explain a little bit about that later. People join Toastmasters for many reasons. For me, as Gary mentioned and as Gordon mentioned, I've always had a huge fear of public speaking. It goes all the way back to when I was in grade school and I was in plays at school. When I was a green bean, I would almost always forget my lines, so I've always had a fear of public speaking. But my job required me to give several presentations per month. So in order for me to accomplish my job, I had to overcome that fear. So 10 years ago, much like you did, I walked into a Toastmasters meeting for the first time, and I was shocked and amazed at how supportive and warm the environment was. I agonized over that decision for many months, and once I walked in, I just kind of knocked myself upside the head for not doing that many years earlier. So I was in Toastmasters for 6 years during my first session, and my public speaking increased immensely. I became comfortable in front of an audience, and it was a great environment. But unfortunately, my job progressed to the point where I could no longer attend the Toastmasters meetings. So even though I didn't want to, I dropped out of Toastmasters. And over the next 2 years, I began to revert back to the same habits I had prior to joining Toastmasters. And I was nervous in front of an audience, and my speeches and presentations at work definitely suffered. So at this point, I became desperate to rejoin Toastmasters, but my situation at work had not changed, and I was still not able to rejoin the club. And then one day, a light bulb went off inside my head, and I thought, I wonder if there's a group of people who are crazy enough to have a Toastmasters meeting on a Saturday or a Sunday. And I checked, and sure enough, I found this group of people, and they weren't quite as crazy as I thought they might be, who met on a Saturday morning. So I walked in here, or actually in our previous site 3 years ago, joined the club, and it's been great ever since. And the one thing I like about Toastmasters is that every person who comes into the club has a different goal. Some people come in because they want to be a better communicator. Some people come in because they want to be better leaders. Other people have, some people, Carol, for example, probably is a member of 5 different clubs. I'm a member of 1 club. Joe's probably a member of 10 different clubs. So a lot of people have different levels of time commitment also. But the great thing is you can really tailor your Toastmaster experience to whatever you want to get out of it. That's one of the best things about Toastmasters. So I really welcome you. I really urge you to take this great opportunity that you obviously are interested in, because I guarantee you, if you come to our first meeting, and our next meeting, we have a meeting next week. If you come to a meeting next week, I guarantee you, you will not be disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Darren brings a lot of depth to our club. I love his speeches, and he's a very good evaluator also in giving feedback. You're a good listener. Thank you again. Sheila Mudbaker is our secretary, the 5th ranking officer of TV Toastmasters. She is also a member of ACE and is the 2nd ranking officer as the Vice President of Education. Besides her many Toastmaster activities, she has many, many other community activities. And let us welcome Sheila Mudbaker.
Thank you, Carol. Why did I join Toastmasters? It was an accident. It was absolutely an accident. Years ago, a fellow sat next to me who wouldn't shut up, was a member of Toastmasters, and I couldn't make him stop talking. And I got the impression that Toastmasters were people who didn't know when it was time to stop. So I wanted nothing to do with Toastmasters. But my best friend was told by her boss that she had to go to a Toastmasters meeting and work on her speaking skills, or she couldn't continue in the company. And of course, she was too nervous to go to a Toastmasters group by herself, so I went with her. And she went 3 times and never came back, but I was hooked. I love to speak. In case anybody knows me out there, you know, if give me a chance to talk, I'll talk. I thought I was pretty fabulous. Years and years later, I'm still a member of Toastmasters, and every time I go to a meeting, I learn so much. I learn more and more and more. I thought I was wonderful. I was really pathetic, but I didn't know I was pathetic. Extrovert that I am, you would think that I've had lots of skills. I was in theater, I've been on television, I've done films. I just love being in front of a group, cameras. I was a trainer. I thought I was really good. Each time I would come to a Toastmasters meeting, I would learn one more thing I was doing weirdly at work, and I would discover that there were a lot of people a lot better than I was, and I better start paying attention to what they were doing and learn from them. But what I really loved about Toastmasters are the people. The people are fabulous. Really fabulous. They pour out their hearts and souls. They tell you their plans. You learn so much about people and what interests them. Completely different views than I would ever have on my own. It's amazing. Just amazing. So, television Toastmasters, TV Toastmasters, even better. Most people are afraid of the camera. I love the camera. I love the camera. I love my audience. I love you. I love you. I love going to the grocery store and having people talk to me because they think I'm a movie star because I'm on television. You too can be a star. Don't wait for your 15 minutes of fame. Join TV Toastmasters. Madam Toastmaster.
Sheila's talk, her speeches are they sound so much like real life that when she was doing a pretend situation, I thought it was for real. But the one thing in her humor speech that I will never forget, Sheila is curious and inquisitive. And when she was 6 years old, she had asked her mother, where do babies come from? And her mother decided that she would explain for real where they came from. And she said, Well, if you don't know the answer, don't make one up. Let's give her another hand. Oh, we have someone else that I didn't see before. We have someone else that we would like to thank, and Steve Ahrenholz, before we do our door prizes. Steve Ahrenholz is responsible, he's our third ranking officer, the vice president of membership, and he is responsible for putting this open house together. Let us welcome Steve Ahrenholz.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, this is my fault. And some of you may have noticed on your program that it says March 8th, 2008. And the question then is, Steve, what is the problem with you? Well, let me tell you, I knew this morning when I got up we would not have a blizzard today. Tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, other things like that, I don't know. But I know a couple of my fellow Toastmasters this morning that I was talking with about this. Third time is a charm. If this wouldn't have come to pass today, I think that I would have just, it would have been time to say, okay, Steve, this is not meant to be. Just give it up, find something else, and try later. So I want to thank everyone in TV Toastmasters, our open house committee that we had. I want to thank all of you that came to visit with us today. It's a beautiful Saturday morning, and you're spending time with us. I want to also reinforce some of the things that some of other speakers have said. One of the things I like about Toastmasters is that everyone is very supportive. And sometimes I find that if I'm in a funky mood or I've not had a day that's gone well, and I go to a Toastmasters meeting, I always feel so much better afterwards. It reminds me of Stephen Covey's one guidance to sharpen the saw, and that includes associating with positive people. And that's one of the things that I get out of Toastmasters. But I want to thank Carol for being our Toastmaster today, too. Carol and I have a rather unique distinction as far as TV Toastmasters go. We are the short and long of it as far as the camera angle when it comes to videotaping our meetings. We have to both get up here, and they want to see if they can still see Carol when they're looking at the top of my head, and if they're looking at Carol, that they haven't cut off the top of my head. So I'm going to turn it back to our Toastmaster this morning. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Steve. You are a delight. And I now adjourn the meeting of TV Toastmasters 9523.